Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January patch preview. My name is Ólafur Steinarsson, and I'll be showing you the cards today. But the expert commentary is going to be coming from Innocent Bubbles. Bubbles, how are you doing? And Happy New Year!
Happy New Year. I'm doing well. I'm psyched about this patch, and let's get 2021 off with a bang.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed your holidays, but not as much as you'll enjoy this next change. We'll start off with Call to the Colonies. That's being dropped in cost from 5 credits to 4 credits now, making it a little bit more, affordable in the decks, giving a little bit more power to France.
I think that's an awesome change. I think it was a long time coming that this card got a buff. It's kind of been sidelined for a while, and I hope we get to see some cool, maybe Brit France control decks with this.
Yeah. All right, next one. This one is from Japan. It's the only card from Japan that's being touched this patch, and it is Surprise Attack, and that is being dropped down a credit. It used to cost 2 credits, but now it's 1, and that is a pretty huge change because it means that now you can remove a unit if you have 2 of these for 2 credits instead of 4.
I think it's worth noting that actually you're buffing 2 cards here. You're buffing this card, and then you're buffing the little tank for 1 that gives you a surprise attack. So in a sense, it's 2 Japanese cards being changed. Interesting to see if we'll see some more mass pin decks come out with this.
Yeah, and I know for me, like, the surprise attack is always number one, a surprise when it happens to me, and it kind of sucks. So this, I think, will also beef up kind of the value of some of these cannot be pinned tanks in the meta. So it's going to be really interesting to see if that.
Or the new order that gives something cannot be pinned.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, man, what was that? That's forget what it was called.
Oh, I don't remember the cards.
Rapid
names.
engagement. Yeah, I think it's rapid engagement or something. That's a great point. All right, we're going to be swapping over to the US of A now, and with this change, I believe we're going to be seeing one of the fighters for the US come back into play. A fighter that I believe has seen pretty much no play whatsoever so far, but it's the P-51 Mustang. So now, deployment: deal 5 damage to a random enemy air unit.
Oh, I really like this change. It sort of took this boring, kind of lackluster ability, and this is very exciting. This is enough damage to one shot a B-17, sort of the staple of big bombers.
Yeah, it's actually a huge point there because this means you have extra ammo in that back and forth US mirror matchup where one person goes B-17, the other goes Avenger, you go B-17 again, then you get a B-17, back to you, and now you can counter with a Mustang, right? Yeah.
One more note before we move on. This thing's 6 attack damage also means it can one-shot a B-17 by hitting it, because that's 5 damage through a heavy armor.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the old effect, for anyone wondering, was increase the operation cost of enemy air units by 1. So it was really bad. Let's be real.
Very, very underwhelming.
That's why we didn't see a whole lot of changes, a whole lot of play. Sorry, but a card that has seen a whole lot of play, and I would say is pretty much a staple in almost all US decks, is Seaborn Invasion, which now costs 9 credits instead of 8.
And that's the only change, just 9 credits.
Yes, but that's also because the units that you're able to roll with Seaborn have become more powerful. It means that 8 credits was a little bit too cheap for the high rolls of Seaborn.
Sure, it's an interesting change. I'm curious how much it's going to affect the card scene play. We have seen 9 and 8 credits being a very important difference in cards like Tractor Factories. So I'm interested to see how much it'll affect the card, whether it will make much difference or whether it will completely blow the card out of use and we'll just never see it again.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is that, is that balance. It's that tipping point. Can you rely on that turn 8, oh shit button, right? I need to put a beep on that. Like, oh crap button, is like all of a sudden you push everything in the front line back and you get a second breather, right? But now that comes a turn later, and that could be the difference between winning or losing a game.
Absolutely, and it's an anti-aggro card, and anti-aggro cards are really the ones that get affected the most by credit cost increase.
Yeah. All right, the next one, another very, very, very popular card right now. It is Bolster the Ranks. It is being buffed up from costing 3 credits to costing 4 credits. A little bit too powerful, maybe at that 3 credit mark. We've seen it quite a bit in the meta over the holidays.
I think this is necessary. I think everyone saw this card and thought that's pretty good, and then we played this card and we went, "Oh my, this card is absurdly good." The fact that it buffed the unit and let you use that unit, you put this on like a tank or something, and it was
Mhm.
just really, really powerful. I think this change was due to happen.
Yeah, I agree. A little bit too powerful at 3 credits. It was pretty much close enough also to the credit cost of actually moving and operating your tank that you were actually saving credits a bunch of the time because you were using it on 2 op cost tanks, and now it at least costs as much to make it 0 op cost as it would be to operate it instead of 1 less.
I
So
mean, it really reminds me of Shiden. It was the same cost to buff it as a single attack, and it
yeah,
took your 4 damage to 17 damage, which
yeah,
is a huge increase in damage.
yeah.
So I think this change is really sensible.
Well, we're going to be hopping over to Germany now, and the first one is the Heinkel. It's being dropped down to costing 4 credits, and when your HQ is damaged by a ground unit, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ. So getting a little bit more, um, or getting a little bit of a different effect there instead of a non-Heinkel unit.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is a good change. I mean, overall, it's more competitive. Obviously, there are situations where this is going to be less useful of an ability, but the fact that it costs less just makes this card overall more competitive because it's just way more reliable, and you can
Hmm,
just drop this. It's sort of like a zero at this point, a 4/5 for 4
hmm.
with an extra little ability. It's not as strong as the zero's ping, but you can sort of think of this sort of like a zero or maybe a Spitfire.
Yeah, decent body, for the price. So absolutely. Staying in Germany, the next one is a fairly underutilized card, and this card is something that is in the starter decks, and a lot of people go like, why? Because it never sees any play, and it is called Dive Bombing. And now it gives an enemy unit -3 attack and -1 defense until the start of your next turn. So a little bit more effective at curbing that attack, being -3 instead of -2 as it used to be.
So funny story. Earlier, I was going through cards, like all the cards in the game, and I was trying to pick out what I thought were the worst cards in the game and possible changes you can make to make them better. And this is one of the cards I almost picked out as one of the worst. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, how could I make this slightly better? And it was either make it -2/-2 or make it -3/-1. So
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see that I was going through the cards earlier and came to the exact same conclusion that this card just needed to be slightly better, but not too much better.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a reason why we don't see a ton of this, but with this change, I think a lot of people might go digging in their collection and find a hidden gem there in the form of dive bombing. It could probably fit into some good decks. Next one, another card that has been extremely popular for a while now, being taken down a scooch, and it's called Encirclement. So Encirclement now costs 3 credits instead of 2.
Yeah, I think this is a fairly reasonable change. I think some aggro players might be slightly upset about this because it felt good when you duped a 3k unit for 2. You kind
Mm,
of had this increase in value, but I think it's a very reasonable change. It hurts a bit to dupe a 1k unit with this now. If you dupe like a 15th cavalry or something, you're spending 3 credits for a 1k unit. But overall, I think this is a fairly balanced change, and for
mm.
when you're getting like a panzer out of this, it's fairly reasonable.
Yeah, and also Volks Grenadiers and kind of other big units where this was kind of, I would say, disproportionately powerful on, and I believe putting it up to 3 credits makes it more uniformly powerful. Yes, it makes it less powerful on the lower cost units, but it makes it more reasonable when you get up to those bigger 3 cost units.
Sure, sure. I mean, Flampanser, one of the staples was you drop your Flampanser, clear the front line, turn 3.
Hmm.
Turn 4, you would move up your Flampanser and dupe it, and aggro decks would just be bricked against you because you had these 2 huge tanks in the front line.
Yeah, and add on top of that now, like the fact that you had Bolster Ranks, we could give that a +2/+2 and 0 op cost. All of a sudden, the threat of the encirclement also changed a little bit within the game environment. So All right, next German card. That is an elite card that I have never seen played personally. It's called Exploit the Gap. It's being dropped down from costing 7 credits down to 6 credits, and I think this might make it see some play.
I think it's certainly better now, or it's objectively better, but whether it's good enough to see play, I'm not sure about. It sort of had a downside to it where you had to run small units to take the front line, but you had to
Mhm.
run big units for this to get value. But now those big units aren't as big where it still gets value. You can use this to get like a Panzer A or something, or
Mhm.
Panther A, and it's still useful. I
Yeah.
think this is possibly going to see play in German control, but I don't think it's going to take over anytime soon. I think it's just a bit too narrow on the ability.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. Um, I cannot say that this next card is an unpopular card. It is a very popular card, and this is a change that might make some people a little bit sad. But Flamponser is getting changed now. Destroy target enemy ground unit with cost 1 or less. So no more shooting airplanes out of the sky with flamethrowers, which is just really really weird.
I think we're going to see a worryingly large amount of Brit Air. I must say, of all the changes, this is the one I'm least a fan of. I sort of felt like Flampanzer was a risky card to change. It keeps a lot of decks in check. I think Brit Air is going to be very, very popular for a while. Maybe we'll see more sudden strikes and things like that being ran to substitute the Flampanzer. It's an interesting change. I'm not going to say I totally agree with it, but I mean, I'm just a player. I don't know almost as much about it as I could do. So I'm interested to see how it plays out and whether it proves us all wrong with the balance.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also worth thinking about. This makes it a little bit more difficult for Germany to gain card advantage because you've just limited the number of units you can just kind of take care of um, by deploying the Flampanzer. Now you need to start thinking about, like you said, running removal and so on. So this is definitely a slight nerf to kind of the German control style matchup, which means that there might be some card changes or tweaks to be made to like more sudden strikes or other types of removal. Um, but however, at the same time, the Flamponser is still a really, really strong card, and it became stronger with the addition of Bolster the Ranks into the meta. So there needs to be some trade-off at some point, and it just feels really weird to be shooting planes out of the sky with flamethrowers. I'm not gonna lie. All right, so the next one is gonna make Scout cry, but Rush production now costs a credit.
Oh, yeah, Scout is not going to be happy about this. I think most players won't mind too much. I think it's safe to say that sort of 90-95% of the player base don't even think about rush production. But those that do like it and those that like to use it are going to be really, really hurt by this. It's going to slow autocannon decks, which are the main user of rush production, like your baby combo. It's
Mm.
going to slow those down by at least a couple turns when they pop off. I wonder if they're going to try and find some way of working around it, but it's definitely a nerf to those sort of turn 6, turn 7 OTKs that we sometimes saw.
Yeah, and that's something that I mean has been kind of debated in the community as well, whether or not that is healthy or not. And it's going to be interesting to see what this does to those types of decks. It might be too big of a blow, who knows? But we'll see, and that's going to be continuously monitored. Swapping over to the Soviets now, Barrage is getting an update. To choose one, enemy units have -3 attack this turn or deal 5 damage to a ground unit.
I think this is a necessary change. There's this sort of issue in cards where most of the choose one effects are both too weak for the card to even be viable. And Barrage was one of these cards where both the effects were just so bad that you'd never want to choose one. It was sort of like that 3K order that the Americans have, carrier
Carrier
cover.
cover, yeah.
They just too bad of the effects or how much it costs. With this one, you've gone the other way. Instead of decreasing the cost, you've made the abilities better. I think this is a good change.
Yeah. All right, next one up is another rarely used card. It's called Counteroffensive. It's a 2 credit off. It's a 2 credit order, and now target infantry or tank gets +2/+2 for each damaged unit on the battlefield. This used to be +1/+1.
This is actually really, really quite big now. If there's 3 damaged units on the battlefield, you're giving a unit +6/+6 for 2 credits, and it's not even limited to Soviet tanks. You could put this on some sort of tank or infantry with Fury. You could put this on like a bicycle regiment or a Hummer, and just do a whole bunch of damage in one turn out of nowhere.
And doesn't Winter Warfare isn't there a Soviet card that deals 1 damage to everyone?
Yeah, Winter Warfare deals 1
Yeah,
damage to
yeah.
all. So for 3 credits, you could potentially pop off with this. The only downside is when you go wide with Soviets, you tend to be using light infantry, at which point you don't really want to be pinging them all because they're
Yeah.
fairly low on health. But I'm definitely sure there's some cool combo decks that you can use with this.
This is like tokens plus frontal assault plus winter warfare plus counteroffensive. Whoopah! Pop off. It's like
Yeah, you
2020
suddenly
unit. That's actually pretty fun. I think this is going to be an interesting addition to that toolbox. All right, then the next one. It's a card that's been very powerful. It's definitely very powerful as well in the kind of lower ranks of the game and earlier on in the journey before players are playing with a full collection. And is the 17th Rifle Regiment. The operation cost going up from 1 to 2, making it a little bit slower. And it's still a big presence on the board, but doesn't really murder you as fast.
I think this is a good change. One of the most common ways we saw this in higher ends of ladder and in tournaments was when people Euroed into it. You play like Siberian Transfer, you'd hit in Euros, and then you'd get this, and it was only 1 credit to hit with the guy. So it slows down the Euros combo into this guy by 1 turn, which I think was sort of the main threat in high ladder. And then for those lower tier games where people don't have quite as full of a collection, like you say, this card was just a powerhouse and just would take over the game very quickly.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a change that a lot of people are happy with. Are you ready for the last change of the patch?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Save the best for last. Night Witches. Add a Polikarpov PD2 or from the people to your hand. Shuffle Night Witches into your deck.
I think from the people is going to be the choice you tend to go for. The
Yeah.
bomber was more of an added bonus. You were like, I'm getting a removal card, and then I have a nice little bomber to put down as well. I don't think this is going to kill the card by any means, because you can still go infinite, and it's still, I think, a stronger infinite than the rifles are. However, it definitely hurts the card. I'm questioning whether it's still a must-have in every Soviet deck. Probably, but it could definitely have an argument for not running it in certain Soviet decks.
What I feel like is super interesting here now is this, in my opinion, makes the Night Witches v Night Witches scenario a whole lot more interesting. Because now you're not always getting both cards, you have to choose. So maybe your opponent has one additional bomber than you, but you pick the bomber instead of from the people, and he there's this kind of now a difference that can happen in terms of strategy when you get to that late game, kind of just bottom of the deck redrawing Night Witches over and over again. And I think that's a pretty interesting part about this change. I agree with you. I think this kind of, it also just makes sense. I mean, you were getting so much for 1 credit before, right? So much, but now you can choose, do I really need that unit, or do I want that removal?
I think it's a good change to the card. The card did feel a bit silly, especially when you hit stalemate so often. Having a way to play around stalemates and sort of going for one side or the other, like you say, I think it's a good change to the card. I'm very interested to see how it will play out, and if we'll have just as many Soviet stalemates.
Well, those are the changes overall. How do you feel about this January balanced patch bubbles? What do you feel like? Are we kickstarting 2021 the correct way?
I think it's a really, really good balance change. There's some cards I'm nervous about, such as Flamponser, but I think we've hit a good balance in this patch of subtle changes that are going to bring cards that weren't seen much slightly higher, or cards that were seen too much slightly lower, but nothing too big where it's going to completely ruin the game, but yet big enough where there's steps. You don't want your changes to be so small that the game feels the same, but you want it to be big enough where there are differences, but not too many differences. And I think this patch really hit that sweet spot. I'm excited to see how this plays out on ladder, and I'm super excited to see how this plays up in the upcoming tournament.
All right, awesome. That's going to be it for us. These were the upcoming changes. Make sure to check out the dev blog from Kiele that explained these in more detail. My name is Olav Steinarsson, and that is Innocent Bubbles. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next patch preview in about a month.